Pro Football Focus lists the DeAndre Swift decision that the Chicago Bears have to make on his future as one of the biggest decisions that the team has to make. Do I agree with that? We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to look at some Keenan Allen potential replacements as a new list has popped up there. We're going to do all that, plus more mock draft news and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. I'm the host, Trey Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. And I want to start off talking about, DeAndre Swift. Pro Football Focus actually lists DeAndre Swift in the pending decision that the Bears have to make on his future as the biggest decision facing the Chicago Bears this offseason. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, right? And I think that the decision is a lot more straightforward than what Pro Football Focus lays out here. But they do say this, right? While offensive lineman remains the focal point as far as improvement, running back is another question mark on this roster where DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson are the current options. Swift's performance, coupled with Johnson's intention to run the ball, has led many around the NFL to speculate about upgrades. But pinpointing the location is tricky. This year's group of free agent running backs doesn't feature any legitimately consistent superstars, as only Aaron Jones resides in the top 20 of PFF's rankings. The good news is that this draft is loaded at the position, but identifying when the Bears will want to pull the trigger with other needs along with offensive line and defensive line isn't easy. Could it be with Genty at number 10, or day 2 with someone like Caleb Johnson or Cam Skedabu? Listen, the running back situation is one that, I think everybody's starting to realize the Bears are going to do something at running back, right? You just signed DeAndre Swift to a 3-year, $24 million deal last offseason. He has 2 years left on his deal. Roschon Johnson is a former 4th round pick as well for you, right? Who hasn't really been used a whole lot. That could change under Ben Johnson. He hasn't always been too healthy either, right? So will Ben Johnson want to come in and replicate what he had with like Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery? Like those type of things is a huge question here. But I don't agree with that. It's one of the biggest questions that the Bears have to address. I think that, if the Bears sign another solid running back and throw that out like with what they had last year, that Ben Johnson's going to get way more out of it than what the Bears did last year, for example, right? So, I mean, it's still the offensive line, of course, which is the biggest thing. But even when we start talking about position groups that need to be addressed, defensive line, overall is one that needs to be addressed more. I would even put the future of safety, right, because of the health of Jaquan Brisker, kind of higher up on that priority list. But this is a draft where there are a lot of running backs. Right? We talked about Quashon Judkins as well being a huge potential guy there for the Chicago Bears. That does make a lot of sense. So, overall, I'm not too worried about it, right? The thing that I'm more worried about, of course, is the offensive line. That is the biggest question here for me, and that's the biggest thing that I want this Bears team to focus on is addressing the offensive line. And we got some things that we need to figure out there, right? But overall, the running back position is not one that I'm too worried about. I'm not too worried about it when it comes down to it. But when you look at the Bears, yeah, they have a opportunity to fix the offensive line here, which gets us to the next topic that I want to actually get to, right? So, of course, leading into the draft, you're getting a lot of kind of mocks and things of what the Bears should do. And I think it's interesting to point out that Matt Miller talked about the prospects in the draft, and he actually said this: only 2 first-round grades were given to offensive linemen coming into this one. And I think that says a lot, right? When you hear a lot of people talk about, like, would the Bears actually go a different position at number 10, that could be a reason why, right? Will Campbell is one of those guys that is definitely looking in. And he drew a pro ball a comparison to Deion Dawkins as well, but he said this: Campbell will spark intense debates in NFL scouting rooms as teams decide if the 3-year starter at left tackle will remain at that spot in the pros. The 6'6", 323-pound pounder is a technician with great agility and balance, but his shorter arms and an upright stance, which lacks base power, could force a move to guard. Whether he's on the inside or on the outside, I think confidently give Will Campbell a round 1 grade, which is really good when it comes down to that. The only other offensive lineman that drew a first-round grade was Kelvin Banks Jr., another guy that we've talked a lot about potentially being there for the Chicago Bears, right? He compared him to Chargers left tackle Rashawn Slater, saying this: Banks has been the anchor of the Longhorns offensive line since arriving on campus as a freshman. The 6'4", 320-pound frame might scare some scouts in pass protection. Banks' elite footwork makes up for the lack of length and has helped him allow pressures on an FBS low 0.8% of snaps. He's also an elite run blocker with the power and agility to overwhelm defenders. Banks has the potential to be a top run blocker in the NFL, either at tackle or kicking inside to guard. So what do you take away from that, right? That actually adds a different perspective on how you feel about the Chicago Bears potentially, or could, right? Maybe going a different route at number 10. Trading back, picking up more assets is still an option there. But I do think for those that are looking at, me and C-Dub have had this conversation several times, for example. Anybody who's looking at it maybe being a fail if the Bears don't draft an offensive lineman with their top 10 pick, I think having perceptions like this or perspectives like this from draft experts kind of puts that more into light, right? And that's something that we've talked about here before. There are a lot of really good offensive linemen in this draft, but the gap between those that are going to be drafted in the first round to those that are going to be taken in the second round aren't as large as some drafts in the past. Now, I do think if Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks there, you do have to ask yourself some questions there on if you just go ahead and take those guys as they're the best ones in the draft regardless, and they offer some versatility being able to play tackle and guard. But I think for those that are looking at this situation and saying, well, the Bears have to, at number 10, draft an offensive lineman, what we're starting to see is that may not be the case, right? And it may be that the Bears have and can take advantage of the fluidity in this draft and where some of these offensive linemen are ranked at and figure it out, right? And so that's what it just comes down to, man. There are going to be some mocks that have the Bears taking certain players or whatever. We started our mock drafts yesterday. Shout out to Bobby, who was the first one to get his out. You get, we'll probably drop Kev's tonight when it comes down to it. But I think the Bears, they're going to be able to upgrade the offensive line. I think everybody just needs to keep an open mind on how they go about filling it, because if you think they're just going to go over and get the top guy that you think are with round 10, we'll see what happens overall with that. But on top of it, we got two starting center guard positions that we got to figure out, and we got the center position that also needs to be figured out here as well. And that's where I want the Bears to to sign a veteran at, right? So when we look at the centers in the free agent market, for example, you got Ryan Kelly from the Indianapolis Colts, Josh Myers with the Green Bay Packers, right? Where it comes down to it, and Drew Dalman as well, who's played 57 games, 40 starts in 4 seasons with the Atlanta Falcons as well, right? Now, the Falcons have been rumored to be likely to re-sign Dalman, and that makes sense, right? But that they have right now, they're sitting at $11.987 million over the salary cap. So while they may have intentions to re-sign Dalman, if you can slide in there and offer a big deal, maybe you can come away with him. But I would like to see the Bears sign one of those guys. I think that if you can get one of those guys to come in here and be your veteran center, I think it makes sense there, right? Even with Dalman being technically undersized, right? But what he does in the run game and things like that, like this is a guy that's a really good positional blocker, right? He doesn't necessarily dominate, but I think he's better than anything the Bears have had at center for the last couple of years. And so that's what I love the idea of Drew Dalman for Chicago. Right now, of course, people are going to always ask fit when it comes down to it, but I think Ben Johnson, I think it's going to be good when it comes down to it. So Dalman is the guy, right? And, Brad Biggs has pointed this out, that Dalman and the Bears have actually done business before as well. They've been, familiar with each other. So I think that as we go forward, there are really a lot of guys that can help shore up what the Bears need at that center position. You pair that with what you're able to get in the draft, there's a higher probability than not that we're going to get this offensive line turned around. Now, you can never assume that because this is the Chicago Bears and this is the NFL, where all it takes is one team to trade up for things to kind of go a different route for you than you expected. But I think overall, like it makes a lot of sense for the Bears to get these guys in here, and they're going to be able to upgrade this offensive line. The route that they go to it, the machinations in which they do to get it done, could be a little different for you than what some Bears fans are expecting and hoping. But I think it'll come down to it. I think the Bears are going to be okay. I think we're going to get this thing figured out this year, and we'll see what holds out there. But another decision that the Bears have to make is Keenan Allen, right? And we've kind of talked about that and who the Bears could sign to replace Keenan Allen. And there's actually a guy that came up to it, and that's Tyler Boyd. Now, one may look at Tyler Boyd and his production last year and say, there's nothing too crazy here when it comes down to it. Now, Tyler Boyd is 30 years old, 6'2", 203 pounds when it comes down to it, but 390 yards in 16 games last season, no touchdowns is a pretty big concern there when you look at production level. But you look at this guy over the course of his NFL career, and you're looking specifically for a third wide receiver, is not somebody that, we'll see what happens there, right? Now, this comes down, from Bears goggles on that list him as a solid player for him. Now, Tyler Boyd is no longer who he was in his prime, right? But he is 2 years younger than Keenan Allen, and the stats aren't there at the level of the key, but you're not looking for that, right? I think that's where a lot of Bears fans are going with this, is looking for somebody who's going to come in and replace exactly what Keenan Allen brought. Tyler Boyd isn't going to do that, but as a third wide receiver, a veteran, especially if you do have any confidence on Tyler Scott being able to show up for you next year, maybe the Bears do take a pivot at Tyler Boyd. But he's not the guy that I look at and I say, I'm too amazingly over the top, head over heels for Tyler Boyd to come here for the Chicago Bears, but it would be a productive signing, would be a scheme fit as well. I think he can fit in with what the Chicago Bears are doing, but I think everything comes down to what the Bears do with the third wide receiver comes down to the confidence and the plan that Ben Johnson has for Cole Kmet, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, right? How much those guys are going to be, how much he feels like he can get as far as production-wise and how many targets he wants to get those guys. And then who you have as your third wide receiver isn't as big of a concern, right? But I still think that, I would love to see Tyler Scott be somebody who really steps up and earns that opportunity with the Chicago Bears. It's just, like I've said before many times, at some point you just got to start asking yourself, Tyler Scott's going into year 3. Why is it a guy that we have still not really, that he hasn't earned anything? Now, some people are going to look at it and say, well, maybe he hasn't earned it. Maybe it has been that he just hasn't been given the opportunity. But I think it's still some questions there on what exactly is going to happen there as far as what Tyler Scott can bring to this team. But, overall, we'll see what the future holds at the slot, not necessarily the slot, just because the third wide receiver doesn't mean they're always going to be in the slot, but the wide receiver 3 there for the Chicago Bears. But I don't expect it to be a huge name. I don't expect it to be the signing that people are looking at and saying, "Oh my God, it's an absolutely huge signing by the Bears, a huge get for the Bears." But it just has to be a productive one, right? I think that's sometimes what, as fans, that we can overlook in, of course, the hunt for getting a big name or having the flashy signing, is that sometimes you just need, you don't need flash. You just need productivity. And I think that that's the thing that the Bears could be looking at with a signing like this. Now, before we get out of here, I want to talk about 2 free agents that the Bears have been listed as the best potential fit for. And one of those is a guy that we talked a lot about. That's Trey Smith, right? And I think when it comes down to it, everybody understands that how big of a get Trey Smith would be for the Chicago Bears at that guard position. Now, there have been some changing of the tides as far as what the future for Tyler Smith is with the Kansas City Chiefs. And if Travis Kelce does retire, that could free up some money for them to keep a guy like him. If not, maybe they do have to let him walk. And as I've said many times when it comes down to Trey Smith, is that he's not the type of guy that you're going to see enter free agency a lot. So if he does get out there on free agency, there are going to be a lot of teams that, because of that, are willing to offer him a bunch for. And the question is, are the Bears willing to kind of match what and get into a bidding war for Smith? That's the question here for Trey Smith, right? And, I've said before, 20 to 25 million. If it starts getting upwards of 30 million for a guard, I get it. He's the number 1 guard in free agency for a reason. All that's there. The productivity that he's there, not allowing a sack during the regular season, even though over the playoffs, there's been some concerns about his pass pro. But I think overall, when you look at Trey Smith, if the Bears are able to go out there and aggressively get a guy like that, you don't knock that at all, right? But just because the Bears are listed as the best fit for him doesn't mean that's going to be what happens in reality. And that's what the Bears have to look at and try to determine is, are they willing to put up and put in that type of money and getting to bidding war Or there's some really other solid guard options there for the Bears we've just talked about as well. 2 players that could be moved to guard that are in there in the draft that the Bears could get. So, well, only one of those guys. There's not a chance they walk away with Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell, because that would be crazy, right? But the Bears have to ask themselves and have to try to manage their assets to see what they can do, to where leverage that they can get there. So we'll see what the future holds, man. Overall, it is what it is when it comes down to it. The Bears are actually listed in that same ESPN article as the best fits for both Trey Smith and for Dalman. And I would say this: if the Bears could walk away with getting both those guys, it's great. You guys know, center guy for me, Evan Brown. I'm very happy if the Bears are able to walk away with Evan Brown to be their starting center. But if the Bears are able to walk away from free agency and get 2 of the top guys at their positions, I mean, you just appreciate that, right? So, and that, it's all built around trying to protect Caleb, right? And trying to put the best thing out there, not just for Caleb, but also for the overall health of your offense and what Ben Johnson's used to, right? So Ben Johnson and what he's seen as far as offensive lines can give us an indication on what he's going to want to try to replicate and bring here as far as an identity for the Bears on the offensive line. And we're just going to rock. We're going to see where that ends up going, man. But this is an offseason where it's a lot to be excited about. It's a lot of potential for the Chicago Bears out there and what they're going to get. All the mock drafts, all the mock free agencies, all of this. It's all going to be really fun to watch for the Chicago Bears, man. This is going to be a very, very, very fun offseason. And we're going to see where the Bears, as far as what and how their rookie class of last year, how that develops. Of course, you're looking at Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, 2 top 10 picks that we got last year that showed flashes of what they can be. But you're looking at those guys taking a whole step up. And hopefully a season that's not as much of a roller coaster ride as last year was for the Chicago Bears as well, right? So overall, fun offseason. We're going to keep it pushing. Those draft videos are going to keep coming. Like I said, more than likely, Big Kev's will be the one that I dropped today on his mock draft. So stay in tune with us for that. But otherwise, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following us at Shy Bears Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. ChicagoBearsCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bears related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, Chi-Town up, but Bear down. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.